In episode 8, we talked about the power and influence of the American Dental Association, which is an organization that most people think warm and fuzzy thoughts about.
Yeah, seal of approval on toothpaste and floss, and that's all my mind.
Exactly.
The ADA, yeah.
Exactly. What people don't know is what this organization does behind the scenes. And last episode, we talked about how the ADA had sent some big guns down to the Virgin Islands to keep folks down there from expanding the dental team to include dental therapists. And dental therapists are mid-level providers, sort of like nurse practitioners and physician assistants, except they practice in dentistry. Well, the ADA doesn't want that to happen, and so they have spent a lot of money sending folks all over the country and rolling out PR campaigns to keep that from happening.
And before we go any further, I want to thank folks for being interested in this topic and for listening to this. And last week's show that got a bunch of views. I got to say, back like 3 years ago, Wendell, before I started working for you, we had just met. We were grabbing coffee, and you were giving me more info on what you do and what you will be working on, what we would be working on if we worked together. And the first thing you said was that you want to start a podcast, so check. And the second thing was that you did a lot of work to expanding the dental workforce in our country.
And you went to sleep right away, didn't you?
I thought this was the most boring topic. I thought you were so cool, and then I heard that you were working on this type of stuff, and I was like, oh God. But there really is something to this. This isn't about flossing. This is about how special interests manipulate our lives. It's something that so many folks would find interest in.
Yeah, who knew? Yeah, exactly. What the American Dental Association would like us to believe is that all dentists in this country are unified in their opposition to this, that dentists don't want this to happen because they think it's bad care, that these dental therapists are not adequately trained. It's not true. But there are a lot of dentists, including some members of the ADA, who see this as a real way to improve access to dental care. And one of them is our guest today, Dr. Frank Catalanato. Dr. Catalanato is a former dean of the School of Dentistry at the University of Florida, and he's been a champion for dental therapists for many, many years. He goes all over the country and talks about them because he knows how they work, and he knows how they can really be a solution to bringing access to dental care to more people.
And something that we haven't mentioned to connect to last week's show, Frank was also sent down to the Virgin Islands to refute the ADA statements and to tell the truth about dental therapy.
So we talked to Frank. We called him up and asked him why he's been involved in this effort to get states to allow dental therapists to practice in this country. He talked to us about his understanding of why the American Dental Association is so opposed to this. And one of the things I thought that was pretty interesting is that how he, as he put it, ran into the buzzsaw of the American Dental Association. He didn't have any idea that what was coming down the pike when he went out to talk up the idea of dental therapists until the ADA caught wind of what he was doing.
And it seems like he's been pissing people off ever since.
He's been pissing people off ever since. I think he relishes it. He's now former dean. I think he voluntarily left that role, but he's still actually teaching dentistry. One of the things that he points out is just how well dental therapists are trained, and he knows this very well. He's seen them train. He's been to Alaska. He's been to Minnesota. He's been all over other parts of the world where dental therapists are working and have been working in some places for almost 100 years. So he knows exactly how they're trained and what they're doing. So he goes into some detail in our conversation with him about what he encountered, why the ADA is so adamantly opposed to this, but also the benefits that they bring to this country.
It's clear from talking with Frank and others that the ADA is very strategic, spends a lot of money on these efforts, but they're focused. Folks don't know what's going on because they don't really want the public to know what's going on. That's deliberate.
What's interesting about this is that the ADA is spending a lot of money, but it's really all behind the scenes. Most people wouldn't have a clue that the ADA was involved in this. In fact, most people, like you said, are completely unaware that we even have this crisis of a lack of access to dental care. The ADA knows this, and they spend a lot of money in very targeted ways to try to make sure that this doesn't get much traction. They actually are not, they're beginning to lose and lose quite a bit. In fact, just at the end of 2018, Michigan became the most recent state to allow dental therapists to practice. So advocates for dental therapy are making a lot of progress, but it's a state-by-state battle. And in every state where advocates are trying to get this done, the ADA shows up and spends a lot of money. And one important thing that Frank points out is that once dentists see how dental therapists are trained and how they can become a part of their team, they get on board with this. They can see themselves how they can benefit and how dental therapists can help them treat more patients.
And another thing that Frank notes is that dentists actually get on board with dental therapy after they see it in action. They see them give access to a wider swath of people, and the dental practice makes more money. The dental practice does better. The greater access is what's really important, though, to mention. This isn't about getting Americans straight teeth or pearly white teeth. To many Americans, expanding the dental workforce in the country is like life and death. Frank even mentions, and I'm not sure if it's going to make the final edit for the full podcast, but that last year alone in Florida, over 4,000 people were admitted into the ER for life-threatening dental issues. That's Florida alone. That's 4,000 people could have died from bad teeth in the United States, in one state in the United States.
Right, and as Frank points out in his remarks, about half, in fact more than half of Americans don't go to the dentist every year for various reasons. One is because they can't afford it, but another big reason is because there just simply are not enough dentists, particularly dentists in rural areas and poorer neighborhoods in the country and Indian country. There just are not enough dentists. And as Frank also says, the ADA claims, hey, we got enough dentists in this country, so what's the big problem? Well, the big problem is that dentists are concentrated in affluent neighborhoods where they've got plenty of paying customers. They're not locating in rural neighborhoods in this country or poor neighborhoods. In 2000, the Surgeon General, David Satcher, released a big report, and he called the lack of access to dental care a silent epidemic in this country. And it continues. In fact, it's been worsening since then. We have a growing number of so-called dental deserts in this country. And dental deserts are these areas, counties all over the country, almost 6,000 of them actually, where there are almost no dentists that are practicing, or very few dentists. And the cost of going to the dentist keeps going up. It's expensive to get your teeth fixed. And a lot of folks just don't have dental insurance either. It's far more people lack dental insurance than health insurance. So that's another reason why it's become such a crisis. And dental therapists can meet a great need, because what we're seeing is that where they practice, they are practicing in these neighborhoods where there aren't many dentists, and they're willing to practice in poorer neighborhoods and in neighborhoods of color.
How do you know Frank? How did you guys meet?
I met Frank at a conference on dental care. I've been interested in this for several years, and I too have been to Alaska, which is the first state where they practice, and Frank's been up there several times as well too, to see how dental therapists are trained and how they are serving the communities up there, and also in Minnesota, which was the first state in the so-called lower 48 to allow dental therapists to practice. And so I've run into Frank at a lot of these conferences on dental care, and the conferences that are put together to try to come up with ways to help people get the dental care that they need.
Just hanging at dental nerd conventions.
Dental nerd conventions. I can't think of anything that's more lively than that, Joy.
So by way of background for Frank, he's a pediatric dentist by training, heavily involved in research and everything that goes along with that. Some years ago, he had some experiences in San Antonio where he saw tons of dental access issues. He then went on to a border town right off the Rio Grande where he saw, quote, hardworking Mexican immigrants with incredible access problems to dental care. He then made his way up to New Jersey where he worked in Newark during the height of the pediatric HIV epidemic, not actually far from where I grew up, where my family still lives. And that's where he realized there was a serious issue with access when he was working in the Newark ghettos with families in their homes. He eventually made his way down to the University of Florida, where he became the dean of the School of Dentistry, and that's where he worked with students to give access to less fortunate folks in safety net clinics. And I'll let Frank pick up from there, but that's where things begin to get hairy between he and the American Dental Association.
I got to Florida in 1995 as the dean of the College of Dentistry, and one of the first things I wanted to do was set up community-based dental clinic affiliations with the college where our dental students could get out of our building and go into the community. And at that time, this was a relatively novel concept, only being done in two or three other dental schools. And that's when I ran into the buzzsaw called the Florida Dental Association and the American Dental Association, who strongly objected to these dental students going to work in safety net clinics like FQHCs, federally qualified community health centers, because, quote, it was going to take business from them and it was going to be competition. And, of course, this infuriated me because these are patients that they're not seeing. They're going to safety net clinics. And I fought right back against them. Fortunately, my university president and vice president, when they literally tried to get me fired, stood up for me 150%. But it made me aware of a significant problem we have with organized dentistry, and I started to see other examples of this, sort of fighting and resisting innovative approaches towards dealing with access to dental care.
Frank spends a lot of his days advocating for the expansion of the dental workforce in the United States to include mid-level practitioners called dental therapists. We mentioned them earlier and in the previous episode, but the American Dental Association constantly pushes back against the expansion. We asked Frank where the pushback is coming from and why the ADA is doing it.
So, where it comes from. So to answer that question, I have to really jump ahead to just last year or the year before that. It comes from, I think, a fear of competition, a perceived loss of their monopoly. For older dentists, a recollection of past recessions where dental practices actually went bankrupt because of poor economic times, and maybe the dentist spent too much money building a luxury practice that was not called for. But specifically to dental therapy, I know people in something called the Practice-Based Research Network. And this is a network of over 1,500 dental practices, dentists, and dental hygienists across the country. And one of their methodologies are little 5-question polls. And along with James Kopelman and I from Pew, sent a poll about dental therapy. And we got what to us was initially shocking results, in that 48% of the dentists responding, and this had a very large response rate, well over 500 dentists, said they thought dental therapy was a good idea. And it made us rethink this issue, and I'm now convinced that the fight against dental therapy is coming from the leadership. People who want to keep their jobs as elected officers of the association because of all the perks they get. Organized dentistry is losing some membership with the millennial generation, and this is a way to show the membership that they're fighting for them as dentists instead of fighting for good health care.
The ADA's pushback comes with talking points, some of which plainly say that dental therapists don't work and are a substandard level of care. But Frank has taught dentists and seen the work that dental therapists do. So we asked him how he responds to negative talking points about dental therapy.
So I respond to that by trying to give them factual information. So approximately speaking, and in generalities, I as a dentist and my dental students learn about 450 to 500 procedures, billable procedures I'll call them, in dental school. And I try to explain to them, dental therapists only learn about 50 to 80 procedures. That's why I can do this in a shorter period of time. Frequently, they do more of those procedures than my dental students would do. I know certainly, for example, there's a procedure that we use on baby teeth, our primary tooth, called a stainless steel crown, when the tooth is broken down very badly. We're lucky if our dental students graduate doing one. And dental therapists are going to do several in their training program. So I know the quality is good. In fact, what we've noticed is the new approach is to not attack the quality issue, particularly when it's an organized approach. You'll still hear individual dentists say that, but the new approach is not to attack the quality issues, but to say it's not really needed. We can solve the access problem. We have more than enough dentists, and that's simply not true. It just simply is not true. You know, what you hear are just lies about it not working. Minnesota, I mean, one of the blessings of Minnesota is that when they passed that legislation, they required an annual report from the Minnesota Department of Health. And those reports are a treasure trove of great data about how well it is working in Minnesota.
But still, despite the facts and figures and research, it's money that Frank thinks really stands in the way.
The reality is, what really wins this for them is their PAC dollars. Every legislator, for the most part, has a dentist. Once or twice a year, that legislator is a captive person in that dentist chair. And then they have a very highly organized PAC system with lots of money, and they give it to support elections. We as advocates don't and can't do that. So, the facts almost don't make a difference. Unfortunately, there's lots of legislators who respond to PAC dollars. There are others who will sit and listen to good data and understand what we're saying and believe us when we say it, and we show them the reports. That's the group we try to work with.
Despite the money that's being used in the opinion of the ADA, the results are there, good results, in many places that dental therapists practice, but especially in Minnesota.
Once dentists see it working, they suddenly change their mind. You know, some very interesting problems now arising in Minnesota. So the same dental association that strongly objected to this 9 years ago, and so the initial folks that hired dental therapists were safety nets, FQHCs, and so forth. Now, all of a sudden, we're starting to see dentists in private practice clamoring to hire them. And, we're concerned about that because we want them in safety net settings, although the rule in Minnesota is that at least 50% of the practice's patients have to be underserved by a variety of definitions. So, like, for example, they're on Medicaid or something like that.
It's not just Minnesota that has Frank excited about the future of dental care in this country. Progress is happening nearly everywhere.
Yeah, so we're thrilled. Arizona has passed, Vermont and Maine have passed, and Vermont is just getting ready to submit their Commission on Dental Accreditation documentation. Maine is still having some issues. My own personal belief is that the Dental Association is putting pressure on any educational program to sponsor a dental therapy educational program. Massachusetts and Michigan are, I think, a hair's breadth away. New Mexico is resurrecting its effort. We're making progress here in Florida. Our coalition is growing by the day with bipartisan support, bipartisan political support. So, we're just trying, and you just got to work hard, call out misinformation when you see it, and try to convince the legislatures. I met a young dentist named Dr. Mike Miskovich from northwest rural Minnesota. And he and his dentist partner have 2 therapists in their practice. And last year, they didn't do a single restoration, a simple procedure like filling. Not a single one did they do. Why? Because there are no specialists in their area of the state. So they're going around doing a lot of continuing education, learning how to do more complex procedures, and that's how they're spending time in their practice. Well, this is terrific. It broadens, it clearly broadened the scope of their practice and allowed them to see a lot more patients than they would normally see, allowed them to do the more difficult, complex procedures, and their therapists did the other procedures.